Welcome to your Aged Care Compass podcast. Join us to find out how to support your older loved ones at home. We're going to help you make sense of Australia's aged care system. We talk about legal and financial considerations for ageing and how chronic health conditions impact your older loved ones' well-being. And we share real-life stories of where it went wrong for people and how we got them back on track. Welcome to today's episode of Your Aged Care Compass. When a loved one dies, there are a range of tasks that need to be completed, some obvious and some not. Today we're joined by Danielle Phillips of Sage Executor Solutions, who'll be chatting with us about those obvious and not so obvious tasks. Danielle Phillips, an only child and the founder of Sage, realised the importance of a solution to provide support to a deceased person's family and executor of the will when she lost both of her parents at the age of 35 during the COVID-19 pandemic. After countless hours of being placed on hold, weeks of following up paperwork and often being given the wrong documentation to complete, Danielle immediately recognised the need for a roadmap that could effectively lessen the pressure and confusion around deceased estate administration and what to do next when someone dies. For Danielle, the process of helping clients during such a difficult time is more than just a business, it's personal. Danielle, your business fascinates me. Tell us how you came to launch Sage Executor Solutions.
Thank you, Coral. It is a very new and uncharted concept that I'm pioneering. And as you mentioned, it was inspired by my own lived experience of becoming two-time executor in the space of 2 years. And unfortunately, during the COVID-19 pandemic, which made things all that bit harder. So I was thrown into a whirlpool of time-sensitive and time-critical form filling, phone calls, emails back and forward, and document preparation. And it was during a time when I really just needed space and capacity to focus on the loss of my parents, but I certainly wasn't afforded that luxury. So I was navigating my way through this process with no kids, and I was fortunate enough not to be working full time. So it really dawned on me that how do people that are next of kin and executors of the will manage this process when they have a busy career, they've got children and other dependents? I just couldn't imagine or grasp how they would manage such an enormous task. So that really inspired me to try and create a solution where I could step in and mobilise to, I guess, take on all of those administrative items so family members could just have time to grieve with each other and sit down and have a cup of tea and talk about family memories and look over photos rather than be on the phone to Telstra and Centrelink for those first really few important days and weeks of their healing. So it is important for me to be able to turn my painful experience into something that would lighten the load for others, simply by being able to allow them the opportunity to outsource the majority of such an overwhelming responsibility.
Yeah. Having chatted previously with you, I had no idea how much was involved. And honestly, losing a loved one and grieving and having that period of bereavement, I couldn't think of anything worse than having to do those administrative tasks. So that I've discovered that a service like yours exists is super exciting for me, and I'm sure it will be for our listeners as well. So you've noted that it can take up to 200, 300 hours, my goodness, to fully complete deceased estate administration. Are there components of finalising a deceased estate that typically take longer than other less time-consuming tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. It was mind-blowing to me as well when 12 months down the track, I was still managing all of the tasks and processes, and things tend to come up and pop up out of the woodwork that you just don't expect. And there's layers and layers of complexities there. It's like opening Pandora's box, really. Look, the 200 to 300 hours is on average. And of course, that depends on the complexity of the estate. Some people have more tasks to tackle than others. But generally, what we find is the most intricate and lengthy process is around superannuation and applying for the death benefit. And that's purely because it takes the trustee up to 4 months to review the documentation and make sure that the correct beneficiary is entitled to receiving the claim. But what you can do to streamline and speed up the process, I suppose, is make sure that the paperwork is completed right the first time. Because if you're not ticking a certain box and not signing in the right spot and you send it back to the wrong department, you just get sent back to an already very long queue. It's also really important that you don't treat it as a tick and flick exercise. As a beneficiary, particularly if you're not the spouse, you need to look into what financial tax implications there may be for accepting a death benefit. And so part of what we do at Sage Executor Solutions is we connect our clients with financial planners that can have a look at your current financial situation and advise on whether accepting that claim as a lump sum or perhaps an income stream might be more appropriate, because in, I guess, whichever way you accept that payment, it could certainly affect your Centrelink entitlements, such as the pension. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. They just tick the box, send it back, and then realise in 6 months' time when they've received that lump sum, oops, all of a sudden I'm not entitled to my pension anymore. So it's really making sure that we tackle all of those considerations to make sure it doesn't cost our clients in the long term.
Yeah, I had no idea. You've just opened my eyes on that one.
Yeah.
So, could we talk about the different categories now and what's required? You highlight property, legal, financial, and personal tasks. Let's talk about property. What considerations would a person need to bear in mind when dealing with property and a deceased estate?
Sure. So the first consideration that springs to everyone's mind is probably, what do I do with the property in terms of selling it or renting it? How long do I have to sit on the property before I need to pay capital gains tax? And so all of those big ticket questions come up initially. But my suggestion, and one of the first things that I tackle, is actually updating the home insurance provider to ensure that they know that there's been a change in ownership or occupancy, particularly if the property is left vacant due to a person passing away. And that's because if something happens to the property, whether there's theft or fire or any incident at all, if the insurer isn't aware that it's a vacant property, they may actually deny an insurance claim.
And how easily could that happen, right? You would not think of it.
With the natural disasters that are happening all the time across the country now, and obviously there has been, unfortunately, an increased rate of crime, you just can't leave that to chance. So it is really important that one of the first things we get onto is updating the insurance provider and making sure that everything in terms of the policy is updated and correct.
Fantastic.
So some of the other considerations that would come up around the property side of things are utility provider notifications, such as your home phone, your internet, gas and electricity, water and solar, and even things like arranging a mail redirection. And just a tip on that one, that if it is a deceased estate, you can get a mail redirection set up for 12 months complimentary.
Right.
Yeah, and also things like changing locks to keep the assets safe in the property. And the executor also has a responsibility of taking inventory of all the assets on the property along with their respective values. So that's another tip for executors.
Wow. Okie doke. So moving on to legal, what would this involve?
Yes, so legal is probably one of the biggest considerations, as you can imagine, when it comes to deceased estates. And I guess the first thing we need to understand is there a valid will? If there is, we need to then look at applying for what's called a grant of probate. So part of the service at Sage is connecting our clients with reputable, specialised and experienced probate lawyers.
Excellent.
Yeah, because really you can apply to the courts for a grant of probate yourself. I would never recommend that. The paperwork is cumbersome, it is complex, and again, if you get one little part of it wrong, you get put to the back of an already very long queue. So I will always recommend to my clients that they at least have a chat with one of the probate lawyers that I can refer to hand on heart with confidence. because there can be quite a lot of complexities around even applying for that grant of probate. So I just say leave it to the experts. And there's also considerations around whether, if there is no will, we also then need to look at what we call letters of administration, where the court will actually determine who should be the person appointed to administer the will. So again, there's layers upon layers under that legal banner, but it's really important to be connected to the right person in the first instance to make sure that you're not going around in circles. But a lot of the other menial items that we tackle are things like notifying Centrelink and the ATO. The Electoral Commission's another really important one that people often forget about. Updating motor vehicle insurance policies and registrations of vehicles. And also there's conveyancing matters, which covers all of those legal changes to the property title if it's been sold or transferred to a new owner.
There's a lot of things to do there.
A lot of things to do. Yes.
My goodness me. Okie doke. Well, another big aspect of this is financial considerations. So, what would a person consider with regard to this aspect when finalising a deceased estate, Danielle?
Yes. So the first port of call would be notifying financial institutions just to secure the deceased person's assets, such as their bank accounts and their credit cards, contacting their bank to ensure that there's no safe custody boxes. A lot of my elderly clients actually do have safe custody boxes or vaults at the bank that often they may have forgotten about or haven't advised their children of or their executor of. So it's really important to ask that question as well. And there's also other financial considerations around establishing a tax file number for the estate, opening a bank account for the deceased estate, because any money that needs to be distributed to beneficiaries will first and foremost need to be distributed into a bank account established for the deceased estate. It won't go directly to the beneficiaries. So getting that set up is number one. And then there's also the transfer and sale of shares, which can be quite an intricate process in itself, and also doing share searches to see if mum, dad, or the deceased person actually had any shares that maybe we're not aware of as well.
You know, you were thrown in the deep end. When your parents both passed, you had to sort all of this. I just, listening to everything that you're saying, I'm really glad that a service such as yours exists, because it's just so time consuming. And how do you know? Like you just mentioned, shares and safety lockboxes like that. That's something that I would not think about.
Yeah. Look, luckily for me, my parents were very organised. They were very good record keepers, and they had open conversations with me throughout the years with regards to what their assets were and where they were located. So I was really fortunate that they had everything lined up and easily accessible, and they were open in their communication. But I suppose that the Sage service is even more so beneficial for families that haven't had that open communication, because we can go about doing the searches for unclaimed monies or lost super or shares that they didn't know existed on their behalf, because it's not always as easy as, mum and dad left me good documentation. So we can come in and do a lot of the groundwork around that as well. So yeah, but for me, mum and dad were really, really good with record keeping. So another tip, please everyone keep good records.
Keep good records. Yes. And personal tasks, Danielle. So
Yeah.
From our previous chat, these are the tasks that people just don't tend to think about until they have to. And knowing where to go and how to go about these tasks doesn't present as straightforward or easy as me. Can you tell our listeners, please, what kind of tasks fit within the personal aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are the real nitty-gritties, but they are nonetheless really key and important tasks that shouldn't be overlooked. And particularly items such as memorialising or closing social media accounts, because we're dealing with so much identity fraud these days. We've got so many scammers out there. So anything with a photo identification on it needs to be appropriately cancelled and disposed of. You'll notice when you do cancel someone's driver's license, you'll actually need to surrender it straight away, but making sure that you're doing that with things like passports, credit cards, any sort of photo identification or anything linked back to financial institutions and email addresses. because that's just all key information that people that are really well versed in the field of identity fraud can use. If it gets in the wrong hands, it can be really disastrous. So things like pay TV, such as Netflix, memberships and loyalty cards, subscriptions, and as I said, closing down email accounts are all those little things that we can take off people's hands, because down the track, it's better, I believe, just to have done that housekeeping and don't leave it open to chance.
Absolutely.
FlexiCare is a not-for-profit organisation which supports older people living in Brisbane's southern suburbs to live their best lives in their own homes and communities. FlexiCare don't have grand plans to be the biggest aged care provider. They want to be known for treating each one of their participants as an individual who they get to know well. They answer their phone calls personally when clients ring them. They give their clients easy access to a home care partner who can work with them to deliver the best mix of support possible. If you're in Brisbane South and want to know more, give their friendly team a call on 07 3422 8400 or check out their website flexi.org.au.
You've also mentioned there are at least 40 individual items that need completing with a deceased estate. What else would need to be done that we haven't highlighted already?
Look, we definitely have gone through a lot, Coral, and you probably think, oh, we're nearly at the end of the list, and we sort of are, but there's other things that people don't consider, like e-tags and toll passes. If they're not cancelled within about 28 days, you're going to continue to receive overdue notices and bills in the mail, which is just another piece of paperwork that you then need to deal with. And it's quite triggering and not very nice when you're receiving debt collection or creditors notices for someone that you've just lost. So getting those items cancelled and taken care of within 28 days can save you down the track as well. Look, there's decluttering a home if you're looking at selling or renting, the sale and donation of furniture. So it's organising with people like St Vincent de Paul and the Salvation Army. There's some really great specialised decluttering services that if you've had mum or dad there for quite a few years and the back shed, which certainly was my experience, was full 20 years of mechanical items, car parts. There's things like that to consider that you can absolutely outsource. And then as well, there's things like the disposal of motor vehicles, mobile phones, mobility aids, caravans, trailers. And another really important one is private health insurance, making sure that that's updated as a matter of urgency. And a lot of the private health insurers I find are extremely empathetic and really quite accommodating to people's needs. And they'll even give you a 6 to 8 week grace period where they'll continue to honour your policy. So if you've been part of a family policy or a couple's policy and a member of that policy has passed away, they'll give you a grace period of 6 to 8 weeks to work out how you'd like to proceed, whether it's to continue as a single or to have someone else come on your policy. So they're really, really great to deal with most of the time as well. But also having things certified as true copies, such as death certificates, birth certificates, and other photo ID, things that come up under that personal category and form part of the 40 items that we assist our clients with.
Okay, so if a family finds themselves in the position of their deceased loved one having passed away with little to no preparation, where do they start? How are you able to support them to begin finalising the estate?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the best place to start is reaching out and for us to have a complimentary consultation just so that I can highlight to them and shine a spotlight on these 40 items that they may need to tackle. Because I think a lot of people don't realise when they embark on the role of executor of the will and next of kin exactly how complex it can be and how much of a full-time commitment it becomes. And I guess, generally you're not really aware of the commitment until you're 3 months in and entrenched in the process. And then by that time, it's quite hard to start handballing or outsourcing things. So I would say pick up the phone and we can have a call and chat about those items. And then at least you'll be able to make an informed decision as to what that commitment looks like for you. And do you have the capacity mentally, physically, or emotionally to take that on? And I think that that's really the best thing, is that previous to now, as an executor or next of kin, you haven't been able to outsource that. There hasn't been the luxury to say, actually, I've just lost mum or dad or my partner and I just want to curl up in a ball. There's no option there. It's straight on the phone to Centrelink, straight on the phone to Telstra, which I think is pretty inhumane in such a difficult time. So look, if we do identify that a large amount of assets exist, we would start by connecting our client with a probate lawyer to carry out all of those items and making sure that the executor ensures that the wishes of the will are carried out. And we did talk a little bit more about letters of administration earlier and what that would look like if there was no will and the person died intestate. Again, a probate lawyer would be able to make the right applications on our client's behalf so that then they would have the authority to work alongside myself within that process of administering the estate. Also, just getting a copy of the death certificate then starts the process of allowing us to contact, notify and update the relevant stakeholders on behalf of the deceased estate, and we can get everything tied up within about a 4-month period.
Wow, really. Look, I'm just really excited about this conversation that we're having and the service that you offer. Now knowing so much more than I did half an hour ago, I think people picking up the phone and having that complimentary call with you would just be so beneficial, just to understand what the coming weeks and many, many months potentially is going to mean for them. So someone listening to this episode right now, wondering if their loved one has prepared their estate to avert the workload that would present itself should they die without being prepared, how would you recommend they initiate this conversation with their loved one, Danielle?
Yeah, so look, it's obviously a really sensitive and delicate conversation and a delicate matter, but it is important for peace of mind for the person, I suppose, that is the executor, but also, I guess, the well-being of all loved ones, that there is a will in place and that there is good record keeping, because I too often have clients come to me saying, well, the thought process of my loved one that passed away was, well, I'm not here anymore, so it doesn't bother me. I don't need to worry about it. So it's actually the loved ones and next of kin that are left with all of this hard work to tackle, because I suppose the person that has passed away didn't understand that the impact of that attitude was actually going to have a negative impact on their family and loved ones. So you kind of need to frame it in a way as it's not just about you, it's about us as your family that are left behind, and having clear instructions and a will in place potentially provides more clarity and reduces conflicts among family members. Sometimes people don't want to talk about a will because there is a fear of death, and we all have that fear, and it can be a really difficult thing to talk about. But if it is about a fear and they've got concerns or maybe not sure where to start, it's just assuring them that the will can be updated as circumstances change. It's not locked in forever, and that there are professionals and experts that can help them work through putting their wishes in place that work best for them. So I always say it's an opportunity to frame it as a gift to loved ones to ensure that someone's wishes are respected, and it makes it easier for the family during an already really difficult time. So it's just framing it in a sense that you're looking after us when you go. It's going to make the process just that little bit easier for us to cope with.
That's a very compassionate and sensitive way of approaching it. I really love that. So what if an older person refuses to have a will or a substitute decision maker appointed during this conversation? What would the family member or carer do? Is there anything they can do?
Look, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink, but I think that you can encourage your loved one of any age at any time to establish a digital vault or a digital legacy. So this is actually an online and secure platform where all important information and documentation can be stored. And that's everything from banking information, passports, copies of ID, superannuation information, copies of membership subscriptions, anything that an executor may need to tackle as part of their role or under those 40 different tasks. Generally, you can have a record associated with each of those tasks updated in a digital vault. So if you are successful in having a loved one establish that digital vault, first of all, well done. They are really easy to establish, but just make sure you've got the login details so that if you ever need to access it when your time comes, that you can easily do that. So it's almost an informal way of someone having their will in place.
Kind of like, informally getting their affairs in order.
Exactly. So if they're really uncomfortable about putting that down in a formal document, I would just encourage that they have, again, good record keeping and have all of that online so that if the executor or next of kin need to gain access, then they can easily do that.
Are there companies that have these digital vaults? Like, how does that work, Danielle? This is a new thing to me. I've not heard of this before.
Yeah, there's definitely a few law firms that will actually have their own platform that they use. And look, I'm more than happy to share some of those details and websites with you, Coral, and happy for you to pass those on as well. But if you even just Google digital vault, digital legacy, you'll find quite a lot of options come up online. Some of them have a sort of yearly subscription or account keeping fee, and some of them are complimentary. So it's just about finding the right one for you, but they're becoming more and more readily available as we become, I suppose, a more technical dependent world.
Yes, excellent. And look, we will, if you pass those links on to me, we'll certainly include them in the show notes with all the other information.
Absolutely.
What would be one trick of the trade that not everyone would be aware of?
So a lot of people don't actually realise or understand what a grant of probate is and what it means. And a lot of people don't even think that they need one. That's a starting point. But often what I also find is the misassumption that probate is always required. So really what the grant of probate does is validates the will so that when you go to a banking institution and say, please release the funds for my loved one into the deceased estate bank account, the banking institution will do that without any hesitation because they can see that the court has validated that the will is true and correct. It can be dispersed into the deceased estate bank account, which can then be distributed to beneficiaries. However, there's often minimum and maximum amounts that an institution will allow the release of funds based on. And for instance, if we had someone that may have $50,000 in a Westpac banking account but had absolutely no other assets or money sitting anywhere else, the cost to apply for a grant of probate and then the court application fees can be anywhere from $1,500 upwards to $5,000. Yeah, so the cost to do that, to access the $50,000, sometimes isn't practicable for a family to embark on. So you may be eligible to explain the situation to the bank in that the only funds of the deceased are being held with Westpac, and we would request that based on that, because you're the only ones that we require to provide probate for, that you release those funds with a copy of the original and valid certified will. So it's really important, I suppose, that again, in our initial consultation, we have a chat through what the assets look like and where they're held and whether there's a way to actually get around needing to apply for a grant of probate. Because if you don't need to do it, that's an absolute bonus. One thing that we do find that you will always need a grant of probate for is for the release of an accommodation deposit in residential aged care. That one, unfortunately, very hard to get around. It is all federally mandated. again, you can absolutely ask the question, but there are a lot of clients that have come my way that actually haven't realised that you do need probate to request that deposit to be refunded. So, yeah, it's just always worth asking the question around whether the probate is required if there's only one institution that's holding funds for someone that's passed away.
Wow. Danielle, it's been really great chatting with you today. I really had no idea how much was involved in after death administration, and I can tell you right now, I've learned a lot talking with you today. I just wanted to check now, we have your contact details and they'll go into the show notes, so people can certainly follow up with you, your website, send you an email or give you a phone call. But just for our listeners, because this podcast it's out there, it's right across the country, you can support them no matter where they are in the country, right? Like you're located in South Australia, but you can support people. Your service is available to someone that might be interstate.
Absolutely. I've just helped a client whose brother passed away in Victoria. She was based in New South Wales and I'm here in South Australia, but I'm absolutely able to assist my clients nationally. And the beauty, I suppose, of me having my network of experts in the arenas of financial advice and real estate and conveyancing and probate lawyers is because each jurisdiction is a little bit different, but I've done all of the groundwork on my client's behalf. So if I do have a client in Queensland, I've got the best probate lawyer on hand in that state. I've got the best conveyancer on hand in that state. So it doesn't matter where you come to me from. I've done all of the research. I've either worked directly with that service provider or have had dealings with them so that I can refer hand on heart and with confidence to my clients. So absolutely a national service.
That's really reassuring. Listeners, Danielle Phillips of Sage Executor Solutions. Danielle, thank you very much again for joining me today.
Thank you, Coral. It was my pleasure.
Listeners, as I mentioned, all those links will be in the show notes. I hope that should the need arise, you'll be following up with Danielle. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward with chatting with you next week.
Hey, Care community. Thanks for listening to this episode. So you never miss a show, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. If you'd like to know more about what we do, head to our website, cmeacn.com.au.